Hey everyone, for today's skill breakdown, I'm going to be covering the sage Lady Isolde. Isolde is an Old Faith sage that you unlock during Act 2, though she is a bit of a secret unlock. Unlike all the other heroes, you don't unlock her through a mission, you unlock her through an event. However, this event will only trigger if you have Sir Tristan in your party still on your round table during Act 2. During Act 2, you'll get a prompt for the event. Tristan says he wants to go bring back the body of his beloved Isolde back to Camelot and bury her in the crypt. You can say no to this, but there isn't really much reason to. You get loyalty with him if you say yes, and you get Isolde. After the turn passes, you'll get the prompt saying he brought her back, and you can find her remains within the crypt. Also within Act 2, you get that tome that grants you a resurrection token to bring back a dead hero. Now, the main purpose of this, given the timing, seems to be so you can bring Lady Isolde into your roster. However, if this hero doesn't really interest you, or you don't really care about sages, whatever, you can hold on to that and use it on another hero that died, or you're holding on to it in case a hero dies. When you use the token on her and resurrect her, it will put her in your aspiring heroes if your roster is full, or straight onto the table if you have an open space. She does begin at level 10. If you care about achievements, there is an achievement called Tristan and Isolde where you need to complete a mission with both Tristan and Isolde on your team. With that out of the way, let's just get into her skills. There's a lot of repeat skills here, a lot of stuff a lot of other sages have, but she does have a few things that are sort of unique to her, or at least not every sage does get. With her basic attack, Strike, as always, 3 AP for 100%. Chilling Touch applies chill. Might for 15% weapon damage. Splinter for extra damage against a frozen unit. And Draining Strike, gain 5 HP back when you hit someone. Freezing Attack, a very solid move. Freezes them for a turn. With Brittle Armor, it gains 50% armor breaking. Vulnerability, it applies a 20% vulnerability debuff. Lasting Cold, it now applies Chill for 2 turns after they unthaw. And Chill to the Bone, the cooldown of this move is reduced by 1. We have Bless, a very strong support staple. 30% melee damage to a target. Remember, this is just melee damage. Lasting Bless, increase the duration up to 2 turns. Lighten, the target also gains an AP. Guidance, the target also gains 20% mental debuff resist. Then Mass Blessing turns it into a bit of an AoE. Bless now grants a 10% weapon damage buff to every other ally that you didn't target with it, so the target gets that 30%, everyone else gets 10%. Aura of Protection, plus 3 unbreakable armor to herself and adjacent allies. With Mist, reduce incoming range damage by 6 for those within the aura. Reinforced Aura and Keen Mind grants 10% physical and mental debuff resist to people in the aura. And Extended Aura increases the range up to 2 tiles instead of just adjacent. All Resistance, 15% mental and physical debuff resist. Long Reach, increase the range by 1. This ability I actually think is a bit more important on her than some other sages that can maybe skip out on this, because she does get a range skill in Tier 2 that is a very strong offensive and CC maneuver. And then, of course, Favored, the first support skill, costs no AP. 90% of the time, this just means the first Inspire you cast will be for free, so she'll get a net gain of AP off of that. Moving into Tier 2, speaking of Inspire, the sort of hallmark move of sages, for 3 AP, heroes and allies gain 2 AP for 1 turn, so it is, under normal circumstances, a net loss of 1 AP for the sage. With the Tranquility upgrade, it now reduces cooldowns of allies by 1, but increases the cooldown of Inspire by 1. This is generally worth it, because decreasing cooldowns for everyone else helps them kill sooner, and hopefully you won't need that second round of Inspire to come around in the first place. Mobilization grants plus 1 movement AP, so now it's sort of still a net loss. When cast on herself, she's losing 1 AP, but at least getting a movement out of it, and for every other ally, it's just an even more net gain, because now they get a little extra movement to try and reach the target to then do whatever it is they want to do. Unbind, remove status effects. This one is very useful when it's useful, but a lot of the time, enemies aren't throwing a whole lot of these out, so it can almost feel like this can be a dead talent some of the time, while also super clutch other times. This one I'm very back and forth on whether I want to take or not. Most of the time I don't, and I think I'm okay without taking it. But then there's other times where I'm in a fight and I'm like, man, I wish I had this right now to get rid of that stun. Then lastly, Motivate Self, reduce the cooldown by 1. If you're taking Tranquility, you definitely want to take this, though you usually want to take this anyways. Keeps it at a nice, I think, fair and balanced cooldown of 3. Globe of Protection, gain 50 temporary HP, just a huge buffer of protection for that Sage for 2 turns. Has some really solid upgrades. With Discipline, you reduce the cost by 1. With Elemental Armor, you gain 6 additional armor, just making yourself that much more tanky, trying to make that temp health last longer. Soul Warding, 20% mental and physical debuff resist. So, just making yourself more resistant to any incoming conditions. And Dispel Magic, just cleanse negative effects on you. So this can be useful if you do get stunned, for example. So you only have the low amount of AP because you have some amount of resistance to it. You pop Global Protection, get all your AP back as the status condition is cleansed, and you can keep going with the rest of your turn. Frost Armor, this one is I kind of like, kind of don't. It's very situational. Melee attackers suffer damage equal to 10% of the hero's weapon damage, also increase armor by 5. It's a decent defensive while also punishing some melee attackers. With how I play Isolde, I really don't put her up super close next to enemies too much. So this does get some use. This is sort of judgment call, I think, on your end. I do think she just maybe has some better skills. With upgrades, though, reduce incoming vitality damage by 25%. This is good, but you definitely want to be in situations where you don't need this. Hail, +6 unbreakable armor against range attacks. Useful to prevent your Sage from getting sniped. Enchanted Armor, increase that damage reflection up to 20%. And then Hardened, reduced armor loss by 25%. Something like this, I think, is probably the best upgrade you want to take out of this from a survivability standpoint, because Sages don't have a whole lot of armor anyways, so trying to get extra mileage out of that can be pretty useful. But getting to her first unique skill, a skill I really like, we have Ice Lance. It's fairly similar to Glacial Strike on Morgana, though not quite as good. It has some really good damage, 150% weapon damage, range of 9. This is with an upgrade, but a decently ranged skill at base, and it also causes chill to the target. So good damage, and it has some CC. With the upgrades, we have Wintersmith for 20% armor breaking. This is great. Frostbite for 15% extra weapon damage. Definitely want to take that. Ice Javelin, increase the range by 2. This is what gives it that 9 range, which is a big difference between 7 and 9. This now is letting you outrange some enemies. And then Numbing Freeze. Ice Lance also causes freeze for a turn, but cooldown is increased by 1. Definitely worth it. Increase the cooldown up to 3 instead of 2, but being able to freeze an enemy is such a powerful crowd control maneuver to just completely nullify an enemy for a turn. Super, super good. Overall, this is just a very strong offensive and support ability in terms of locking down some enemies. Then standard passives, Enchanted Weapon for 10% more weapon damage, and then Unburdened when HP drops to 0, reduce all cooldowns by 2. I think this is a decent option for her. Just if with the team comps I'm putting her in much, her health isn't really at risk much, so I don't end up getting this a whole lot. While leveling through the game before you get, super strong, this may be more useful. Finally, in Tier 3, we have the ever wonderful Ice Wall. It starts as a 3-tile long wall that provides half cover and has the same amount of vitality as the hero does. And the AI is still a bit bugged with this and really don't like to attack it 90% of the time, if not more, so this reinforced wall upgrade is pretty much useless. Also, I don't like taking this anyways because I want it to break because of this upgrade of Endless Winter. When the ice wall is destroyed, freezes adjacent enemies. I want it to get destroyed. Sometimes I will intentionally destroy it to freeze enemies, and I want to do that as easily as possible. So even if the ice wall wasn't really buggy with enemy AI, I still would not take it, just because of Endless Winter. It's kind of either or in this situation, and I would always pick this over the extra health. And then there's Icy Winds to increase the cast range by 2. And then Permafrost, increase the length by 2, so now it's a 5 tile long wall. If you're taking Ice Wall, this is a must. 3 tiles is almost never enough to actually do what you want to do in terms of zoning out enemies. Soothing Winds, restoring extra health and armor at campsites and after combat. At base, it's 7 HP after a fight. Brings it up to 10 with this upgrade after a fight. With Recreator and Medicines, you're just restoring extra armor and extra health when you choose to rest at a campfire with their respective options. And then the Cure. The hero and each ally regain 2 vitality when also taking the HP recovery option when resting at a campfire. This is very little and very sort of niche. If your heroes are taking some chip damage to their vitality, this can get some use, but that's about it. I think this would really need to be scaled up a bit more for it to be worth it. Then we have Master of Ice, a great passive for her since she does have a lot of ice skills. One more coming up even. 20% freeze and 20% chill effectiveness. 20% ice wall vitality. Again, I think this would actually be better if it didn't have this, but the first 2 are great and worth taking. First upgrade is Frozen Power. Increase these effects by 10%, so now it's 30% across the board. Enhanced by Cold, increase 10% weapon damage for each enemy affected by freeze or chill. So her damage goes up the more people you freeze or chill, and she can definitely hit a fair number of targets. Shatter, 20% weapon damage against units affected by freeze or chill. And then Cold Blood, immune to freeze and chill effects. This is useful, but again, not a lot of enemies are afflicting this onto your party, so it's just too niche, I think, to warrant a skill point here. For her last active skill, we have another unique ability, a cool one. This one sort of promotes getting her up in personal, actually. It is Ice Aura. The hero gains an Ice Aura for 2 turns. If a unit is adjacent with the hero, they suffer 50% weapon damage and become chilled for 1 turn. This effect will reapply on the unit again at the start of her turn as long as Ice Aura lasts. So if you've seen some of my other videos, I'm sure you recognize this is a similar effect to a relic item that applies a chill aura as well. The only difference is that item doesn't apply damage. This does last 2 turns with a 3-turn cooldown, so it has almost 100% uptime. It still has really solid uptime. With upgrades, you increase the damage through Scathing Cold by 10%. Permafrost, it now applies a 10% vulnerability debuff. Winterborn, reduce that cooldown by 1, that brings it down to that 3. And then Frostskin. Ice Aura also grants +4 unbreakable armor for its duration. Taking this and Aura of Protection does actually create some decent synergy, so now most of her armor will be unbreakable, which is not bad, especially if you're going to kind of go a sort of melee route with her, which you can kind of do. Ice Aura does sort of promote that kind of playstyle. I prefer to sort of use this as a crowd control maneuver or a defensive maneuver. I don't really like my Isolde running into combat. I prefer to kind of have her hang back a bit, do her support abilities, and shoot at range with her Ice Lance. But if an enemy does approach her, Ice Aura is a good tool to help mitigate them. Or if I notice there's a couple enemies in a pocket corner, I can use this and have her approach them and just kind of help lock them down for a couple turns until my other allies come in to help her clean them up. But I'm definitely not putting her in the thick of it and just relying on Ice Aura to help protect her along with other things. I think she loses out too much damage if you want to build her to be tanky enough to survive that kind of approach to enemies. Then for the last passives, Wish of Death, very good. You will get a lot of AP generation off of this because it's, again, any unit dies, not just enemies she kills. And then Mysticism. This one is only for enemies she kills. It will reduce her cooldowns by 1. This can be a little harder to pull off on some sages because they are primarily melee focused in terms of their damage dealing. She does have Ice Lance, so for her, I think it's a lot easier for her to snipe a kill and trigger this Mysticism. And lastly, Divine. HP drops to 0, regain 35 HP. Like I mentioned before, the way I play her, she's really not in danger a lot of the time, so her HP is never hitting 0, so this just doesn't get use. So that is Lady Isolde and her skills. She's a very strong sage, a very solid pick for your main sage in the party. She does lack a mobility skill like Guinevere does through teleport, but I think this is sort of compensated by having a range skill through Ice Lance. And in terms of who you'd rather use, I think it definitely comes down to your preference. Isolde, I like for her more ranged capability. Guinevere, I like for her sort of assassin kind of capability and her mobility to get into melee. I think on average, I'd probably go with Isolde more just because I do like my ranged units. So if nothing else, keep Tristan around just so you can unlock Isolde, and then if you really don't like him, kick him after that. I hope you found this useful, and as always, thank you for watching.